Hello and welcome to Bob's RPG Radio, your number one station for RPG inspiration. I'm your host, Bob World Builder, and today we have a very special recording for a few reasons. First, if you happen to be playing this on YouTube, you already know this recording has a visual component. I was hoping to get this little booth together sooner, and it's still not quite there, but I didn't want to delay publishing this special recording any longer. It is my pleasure to share with you my relatively exclusive interview from PAX Unplugged with the lead designers of Candela Obscura, Spenser, Starke, and Rowan Hall. It was my first time recording an interview in the field as it goes, but I had a lot of fun. I think they did too, and I think you will as well. So thanks again to the folks from Critical Role and Darrington Press for setting this up, and a huge thanks to the channel members and patrons who make all this possible and get these recordings earlier than anyone else. Now, if you haven't already, I invite you to sit back and tune in here on Bob's RPG Radio. Let's just roll right into it then. So, hey, I'm Bob. You probably already know that if you're watching this. And I'm here with two awesome game designers who created this awesome game, Candela Obscura. And well, I probably already told you their names, but now I'm going to have them say it again and share a little bit about themselves.
Yeah, so I'm Spenser Starke. I am a game designer. I'm a senior game designer at Darrington Press, and before Candela, known for Alice is Missing and Kids on Brooms and Icarus.
Hey, I'm Rowan Hall. You've started calling me the mythologist at Critical Role. I'm also a game designer at Critical Role. I'm also one of the podcasters with Willing and Fable. And I think that's the whole thing.
All right. So, for people who haven't heard of this awesome game before, or maybe heard about it and like, I just play D&D. I don't know if this is for me. What would you tell them to be like, why should they give this a look? What's it got going on?
I would describe the game as a gothic horror with eldritch horror themes. Investigators in a world that's just adjacent to our turn of the century, dealing with secret magic coming through the veil. It's all about the occult. Magic with a K is the way we like to explain it specifically.
I've specifically noted that in a few of my videos about it as well.
Well, once you say magic with a K, everyone's like, oh, yeah.
With that.
Okay, Aleister Crowley understood.
Cool.
I think it's Candela Obscura specifically is a secret society that exists within a place called the Fairlands, and it is turn of the century, like you noted. It's adjacent to our turn of the century, meaning that it's set in 1907, but it isn't the 1907 that we think of when we think of like the world that we live in. There are things that are there are things that are just being invented, like electricity, that were invented a little earlier in our world, and there's also things that show up a little bit later that exist in it. So it's like
almost like a slightly different fictional timeline.
Yeah, it's purposely anachronistic in that way, so that you don't have to worry about whether or not that type of glass was, or that type of plastic or something was invented by that time.
We noticed the sticking point invention in playtest was the Zippo lighter. Like, it would absolutely derail a game. Someone would be like, I pull out my Zippo. Oh, no. What if this wasn't invented yet?
Yeah,
so we wanted to make a world.
When were, regular matches invented?
Did you know matches were invented after lighters?
No.
Because the chemical reaction is a much more intense invention.
Tech, basically. Fun fact for everybody watching.
We had to do so much research for this game.
That's what I guess is a plus, though, is the game master and the players don't have to do that research now because you've given enough room for people to take those liberties at their table. And you don't have to do as much homework to play a game, which is always kind of nice.
My favorite invention that I will absolutely always allow in a Candela Obscura game that I'm running is a reskinned Polaroid camera.
Yeah.
Because if you're a journalist investigating ghosts, there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be able to take a picture and then look at it and see if there's a ghost.
Yeah.
It's just not fair. And it's our world, but it's also, there's no reason why you can't say that version of a camera didn't exist.
I would also say, too, that one of the things that we worked really hard on was creating a space where the because it is the aesthetics of the turn of the century, but not necessarily like the exact turn of the century in America, say, or in Europe, or in any of these other places. Like people, a lot of times, I think of turn of the century London, right? Like it's like 1800s London, or like early 1900s
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, right? And so we wanted everybody to feel welcome in this world, and and a lot of people were not welcome in that world. And so one of our main goals was to create a place where everybody felt like they could be involved in a turn of the century kind of occult mystery investigation, without feeling like they had to either whitewash or suspend disbelief or dive into things they're at their table not comfortable with. Like whatever your table wants to bring, you can.
That's what the world can be.
Right, but you're not bound by the actual horrors of history. And we talk about this a lot, just with us, and it's in the book as well. It's like horror games are about making characters feel scared, and the only way characters can feel scared is if your players feel safe. Because in order to dive that deep into something horrific, we all have to feel safe at the table to go there. And so that was one of the other goals, was create a cool, fun, horrific space that allows you to explore the themes that you are interested in, as opposed to having themes imposed on you.
So I feel like in that way, I would agree that, Candela Obscura is a great way to get into this genre of game if you haven't tried one before.
Well, we decided very early, when we were kind of figuring out what the pillars of the game would be and what success would look like for us, that if people said, I tried Candela, and then it made me want to try other games, then that was success for us. Because there are so many games that folks who only ever played D&D, which was me when I was younger. I had only ever played D&D for so many years, that if this can be a stepping stone to other, even more complex, a variety of different games, then we will have, I think, succeeded.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And so I feel like we're already touching on this, but I wanted to ask, how/when did the concept for this game start? I don't know, if you guys were.
I can talk about that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I the concept started even before I was at the company.
Right. Okay.
And so there were lots of iterations as they developed out what they knew from my understanding of it, they knew they wanted to do something that was in the horror, occult, mystery kind of space, but weren't quite sure where to go with it. In how are we making our own system? Are we playing something that already exists? All these things. And so lots of decisions were made on the leadership and executive side, and they were working really hard to make the right decisions around how to start a new show that isn't in Exandria. And that's kind of the big thing, right? This is the first original IP whole cloth that is being made that is outside of Exandria. And so I was brought in when the project was already underway, and they had already developed out the idea that Candela Obscura was a secret society, and that it was investigating paranormal, occult activity, and had thrown some stuff at the wall and brought me in and were like, hey, what would your take on this be, basically? And so I gave my take on it using a system that was being developed already. So a lot of the core system mechanics were coming from these two designers who were working on a system on the Illuminated Worlds for the company. And I was like, I'm going to take those bones and I'm going to put them on this thing that you guys are already developing out, because we have the system and we have we have a world you all want to explore. Let's just smash them together. And so that was how that was developed out. And then very quickly coming onto the project, I realized that I was going to be basically taking a framework that Strash and Layla had developed for Illuminated Worlds, and I was going to be adapting. I was going to be figuring out how Candela is different, and what it uses from what they were developing that is the same, and what it uses that is different. And so mechanically, there was a lot of work for me to do there, and we had a pretty short timeline because it already been the game or the concept had already been in development for a long time, and so so I knew I was going to need somebody to come on board and like basically build out the lore and mythology and like all the stuff, and so I was like, I need somebody who is literally a mythologist, and I was like, I know a mythologist. I know somebody who their whole thing is to take myths that exist in the real world and like modernize them, recontextualize them, and so that's when I brought on Rowan, and we just put our heads down and started working. I don't know if you want to comment on.
Yeah, my first few weeks on the project, I think looking back, I would refer to as monster boot camp. We just spent a lot of time very quickly developing monsters because at that time, continuing to playtest was the priority. So we wanted to develop things that could be utilized for playtest while we were inventing larger structures for the world.
Cool.
And then we had a day where we were building the pitch for the Fairlands and Hale. And those names came around very quickly, and then we kind of backfilled the world.
Okay.
And from my time on, I was in research and lore development, and then there was a day where you looked up and you were like, we're designing this game together.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting too because there was this inclination that like, okay, I'm gonna take the mechanics and I'm gonna focus on the mechanics, and then Ron's gonna come in and like just develop out some more for the world.
Like that.
And it just didn't work like that. Like immediately we were like, oh, we're both designing mechanics and we are both designing lore because they have
to go together.
They have to go together. And I think in the desire to be efficient, it was like, okay, one of us is gonna be one thing and one's gonna be another thing, and it just the realization of like, no, we have to do this together, and that means that we are both designers on the game. Was a really cool way of. We had to really.
So that really happened more organically.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, and I feel like we're touching on some other great questions that came from. Not all these came from my community here, but also from Lou Boffin, aka Luna, who does like a lot of Critical Role recaps. If you're into Critical Role stuff, okay, definitely check out her videos if you haven't already. So you guys are familiar with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. I hope she is pleased by that. All right, so
we're big fans.
Some of her fans wanted to know. I think, and again, we've already kind of touched on this, but what is the process like for creating such a deep and rich history of Hale?
Thank you.
Like maybe where do you begin? Like I guess you already had some kernels of things going on, so.
I don't know that this is a truism for beginning every world, but we began with the triumvirate, so the three power structures that define the politics of the Fairlands. We had an occult secret society already.
Right.
So we had to build in the real world, and I truly, to this day, do not know why we started there. There's probably an ethos, but we came up with there being this triad of power, which is government, religion, and policing, which make particularly good villains in a horror if needed.
Yeah.
They make particularly good allies if you need. And once we had the ascendancy, the primacy, and the periphery, we expanded out from there. And we expanded, I think, to easy things first, which is, does currency work in a similar way to the real world? Do the seasons operate in a similar way? I drew up a sketch of a map because I have this really firm belief that if you're going to play in a very, very small sandbox, you need a big city, you need a countryside, you need a mountain, you need a river, and you need an ocean.
Yeah.
Like if that's your
fantasy,
sandbox.
if it's fantasy, you also need a volcano. But
Oh no! Candela doesn't have a volcano.
Nobody said
grounded, I think.
Nobody said Bridleborn couldn't be a volcano.
It's a volcano.
Volcano, baby.
Canon, you heard it here first. Okay.
But we needed a place to continue playing the game. So I did this quick sketch of a map one day, and our artist Mark made that actual map into the real map of the world. But we had to lay in, I think, a framework so fast that the details were filled in underneath. I think if you agree
so
with
it's
that.
kind of top down. I feel like some people might refer to it that way.
I think we sort of built the scaffolding first, and in the way that I think about building campaigns, right, where it's okay, what are the power structures,
right?
Who's having influence on the world besides the PCs, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that's interesting to me is that when I set out, I should say specifically, to build a game, my first question is, what are they doing, right? What are the PCs doing? What session to session are they doing? And that really defines how you build out the mechanics, but also what details you build out in the world. Because if they are going to, fight, if the only thing is that they're diving into Oldfair, that's the whole game. Is you're diving into Oldfair and you're fighting off ghosts or whatever it is, and then you're getting, you're retrieving things from Oldfair and bringing them back up to the surface. There's no need to develop out an entire world outside of that necessarily for you to play. Yeah. And so it's all about okay, what are the needs of the game? And the last thing I'll say too, which is just backing up from there, is that the very first thing I think we did was we set out the 3 paradigms of the rules. So it's the rules of the world, the rules of magic, and the rules of Candela Obscura. We laid out what are the things you need to know. Yeah. And if you are using those rules, you're playing the game right.
If it's on one page.
If it's on one page. Yeah. And that is all that you need. And then everything else is okay, take the pieces from this that work for you. If you want to go make your own, we've been seeing podcasts that are awesome. People taking the Candela Obscura system and putting it in a fictional city that they've made, right? Awesome. And that's really cool. But they're following the rules of the world in that, and so it works. Candela still works. And so as long as you're following that main page, I think that's the important part.
And aside from our focus being, of course, how close can we keep this to the real world in a way that's accessible, and how much can we divert in ways that are fun, it's interesting when you look through the book, because it is written by someone in Candela for people in Candela, you see the secret world and how it has pervaded every part of the mundane world. And that is because it is a game for people to play in a secret society. So it is useful to know the places that secrets might live. Yeah. And I think it's interesting trying to remember even now what the experience of the average everyday Joe Schmo non-hero is experiencing. They don't know the secrets, nor would they probably care. But that's not a fun way to build a game. So every time we built a new structure, we were okay, where is it cracking? Where are the villains? Where are the heroes? Where's the magic, of course?
All these sources of conflict that the players are interacting with, whether they're trying to fix them or break it further, maybe. Yeah. Cool.
Totally.
Chaos goblins.
And so related to the world, I don't know if there is an answer to this question or if there's one you would even want to share if there is. Sure. But from Luna's community here, what is the otherware like? And what do they call themselves? Now, because I feel like this is a thing where it's you set up these boundaries, you set up this sandbox, and people are immediately well, there is something outside of the sandbox, so what's over there?
Totally.
And,
so
go ahead.
So I'm gonna just pivot us slightly.
Sure.
Only to explain more about otherware, which is or the concept of otherware, which is we had somebody asking, I think it was on the Discord, that somebody was asking about the seasons.
Yeah, they were asking what times of year the festivals happen.
That's right. And so one of the things that we wanted to do with the book, and I think that the approach that we took might take some getting used to if you're used to books that are source books that are designed wholly around creating a fully create the verisimilitude of a world.
Doctrine.
Right, which it's doctrine. So it's well, this festival happens on this week in this month in this in this season or whatever. And So we have a thing, I use this example called the Gauntlet, which is basically like a citywide, what is it, floor is lava meets running of the bulls?
I always describe, I think our writer Tracy Harrison came up with it. It's basically parkour through the city, the floor is lava, running of the bulls. You're trying to win so you can have your name in a museum, but if you die, that's no one's fault but your own. Running along the rooftops.
You chose to run, I guess, right? So, okay.
and so, you know, the questions are like, well, like what season does that happen in? And the answer on our side is like, the purpose of these things in the book are not to tell you what season that is in. It's not to be prescriptive in that way.
Okay.
It's to tell you this is a thing that could be happening in the city. And if you're looking for session prep,
right,
you open the book and you go, that thing's cool. You don't feel like you are betraying the reality of the world.
Yeah.
If you just take that and put it in the next session that you're running.
Right.
Right? If you're in summer, if you've established that it's summer and you're like, well, I guess I can't use that thing that's cool. Right? It's like, so purposefully, a lot of the book is designed to like present prompts or questions or like give you the opportunity to explore something in your prep in a way that hopefully gives you enough scaffolding that you don't feel like you don't have the tools you need, but also don't feel restricted by the fact that like, well, I guess it's not the exact week that we are in for my in my campaign, so I can't use that thing that's from the book.
Yeah.
So I think Otherware falls in that same kind of category for me.
And I would say the obvious continuation of that is Otherware is what you make it.
Okay.
But the reason that we named it Otherware, I had been doing research. We were trying to name Hale, and we had to figure out what other places would be called. And I had done research, and we realized that, of course, countries often call themselves something different than what other people call them. And the relationship of the Fairlands to Otherware is not about what Otherware thinks they're doing.
Yeah.
It's about how the people in the Fairlands are affected. And it's very interesting and tells you a lot about how the people in the Fairlands feel that their language calls them something that's like that other place.
Yeah.
Or even more aggressively, that other place.
Right.
Like,
but we're the Fairlands.
exactly.
Like, come on.
So I think it's more interesting than saying, you know, this place is calling West Country from West over there. Yeah. It's making it almost a slang, a visceral reaction
and it's
to
like
it.
personal, but like on the scale of state, the nation.
Culture.
You know?
Yeah.
Well,
and one last thing there is that the one of the things we worked really hard to do was to make the names of places and even of like, I'm trying to think about the other examples, but like I think places are probably the best examples. Like making them accessible because it is because it's taking place in a world that is like just next to our own. One of the most difficult things I think for players jumping in is feeling like they're going to get a thing wrong if they just start talking.
And it's a game you're supposed to be able to pick up in a session.
Yeah. And all right, yeah.
I was just going to say
because good question related.
Because if we named it like Lephalia or something, right? And you're like, okay, canonize it. Then I, as the players now have to, or as the GM, like I have to learn these made up words for these made up places, and now suddenly the lore gets denser, and some people love that, and I love that for them, and I want them to go and like name it, and like maybe they gave it a real name, maybe whatever it is, but when we put that in the book, when we canonize that, it requires learning as opposed to like collaboration between the player and the book. And we think about the approach to the book in three ways, which is what is the book giving to the GM? What is the GM then asking of the players? And what is the actually let me back up. What is the book providing for the GM? What is the book asking of the GM? And what is the GM asking of the players? Those are the three steps to engagement, right? And if all three aren't included, then it feels like the book is just doctrine as opposed to like in a conversation. So sorry to go on a little tangent, but that's kind of the thing.
That was great. And something that came up there, maybe related to like players learning the lore and feeling comfortable like putting themselves in the world in that way of just having these maybe easier names even, like that's a step toward just being more comfortable role playing in this world. Another question here was how to just encourage more role play at the table for people who are maybe more used to like a crunchier or like more combat focused thing, and who aren't used to as much like interaction with NPCs or even from player to player.
Can I hype you up?
Sure. Yeah, that's very nice.
I'm gonna embarrass Spenser Starke. Okay, so I feel very lucky because I get to play with Spenser in my home games. I get to play with some of the best people in the world. But one thing that Spenser does, and now everyone we play with does, is when you're setting the scene, Spenser will point and say, you know, we've come upon a mansion on a hill. Bob, what does the mansion look like? Describe the mansion. And,
Perfect.
And now all of a sudden, not only are you getting the player to engage, like baseline talk, participate at the table, but also now that player feels some ownership of that idea. And when people get excited about it, they get the kind of joy that comes from that. And to bounce from that and say, oh, okay, and then move on to what does the garden outside look like, and have everybody build it together. Now people who might otherwise be too nervous, again, because they're afraid they're going to get the lore wrong, they made the lore, they can't get it wrong. But because of that, the other trick you do is you pivot into flashbacks. And so now we tease him, and at any given moment we go, and we go to, Bob, tell us about a time you were interviewing some 5 years ago and you felt like you were wildly successful. We're going to mirror the scene.
Well, and I think one of the things one of the powerful things there, and we got to play yesterday. Oh, sorry.
We did.
We got to play yesterday together. So there's so hopefully you kind of saw some of this, but like, I think there's some hesitation from GMs that are so used to they are building the world, or even players that are like, my GM builds the world and I don't want to have to think about like that. I just want to live in my character. But I think the key for me there is that usually when we're doing that, I'm not asking you to make up a thing you don't care about or don't know. So like yesterday in a game, we were playing Daggerheart yesterday, and which was a blast. And so thank you both for being there. It was so fun to have you there. But we went into the room of a child that your character was protecting, and I asked you to describe the room of the child because you know that child better than I do as the GM. And like we went to the mountain, and it was like I had you describe kind of what the mountain was like in some ways because it was something that you made up. You had connections to it. And so instead of asking them to build whole cloth something that like they have no tie to, it's like, no, we're taking the thing that you've shown me that you care about, and I'm asking you for some details about that thing. And then I, as the GM, I'm using that, I'm weaving that into the description that I give of that place to make it feel as though, to create a collaborative environment, but also, I had set up the whole, like when you went into the room with the person you were caring for, I had set up what the whole scenario was, so it didn't really change anything about the plot. And so I think that's one of the keys of like, that's the nuance, right? Is like
people get afraid that the
control's going to go away, and it's like no. It's a collaborative game, and when you give players the opportunity to bring themselves to the world, they will bring you gifts that you never would have thought of yourself, and will make your stories better. And it's about giving them the right opportunities to give you those collaborative moments at the right times that allow you to, in Candela specifically, to maintain the mystery that you're telling, but create the space for customization at the table.
And if you reward people, you'll get increasingly audacious players, and you're like, cool, now we're cooking with gas.
Right. And so a great follow-up to this. And first of all, I feel like a little proud of myself here because that's also something that I just kind of started doing this year in my own
Well,
GM.
actually, we were doing that to talk about you.
Oh, okay. Right. So, it just became a habit of like, well, I'm bad at coming up with a random name unless I have a table right here in front of me, and even then sometimes forgetting the table, right? Yeah. So, it's just been a habit to, okay, what's that NPC's name? And now here's the thing. In my game, we're playing D&D. It's like mashed up with a couple other homebrew things and other systems. And sometimes, like especially toward the end of a session, player improv skills have become as bad as mine at that point. And so like we ended up with at least one ridiculous NPC name who's just is a little kobold guy who's just named Piss. And so sometimes things like this happen in your world. And one of the great questions here was can Candela Obscura also be goofy? Like, does it accommodate like a more comedic play style at all? Is it better for that just to like maybe not force it, just let it come out organically when somebody says something silly? What do you guys think about that?
That's interesting. We talk about that a lot, actually.
Yeah, we do.
Which one? That sounds awesome. I want to play at your tables, please, ideally. It's... To be fair, Spenser and I both love a serious game.
Okay.
We love a sad game. We want to... Type 3 fun. So there's type 1 fun, which is fun in the moment and fun later.
Okay.
Type 1 fun is a birthday party, presuming you don't have anxiety. Type 1 is a present at Christmas. Type 2 fun is something that is not fun in the moment, but is fun later. So people will use examples of like rides, like Tower of Terror. Okay. You're in the moment, you're like, this is terrifying, but later it's fun.
Yeah.
You can think of that how you will. Type 3 fun, which we fully made up, is not fun now and it won't be fun later. And there is a kind of fun in that. It's the enjoyment of the suffering.
I think like the acceptance of like, we're going to do this thing that isn't meant to make us laugh. Like when you watch a sad movie, listen to your favorite sad album. We do.
Sad album is a perfect example of this, right?
Okay.
It's like I feel sad now, and I look back at the lyrics, and I'm like, no, those lyrics are just sad. I think if you've watched the second chapter of Candela that I got to run for the channel, like that was type 3 fun. It was like intense in the moment, and also afterwards we left shaken, right? And it's like, but there's something like we'll do a 14-hour LARP where we're just in.
He's not kidding.
We're like Regency era, like full on intense LARP, and we'll walk away from it, and I'll be like, well, guess we need to rest for the next 24 hours.
It's time to go to Denny's.
Yeah, time to go to Denny's. But I think in that way, like that is what we prefer. So when we play, that's usually how we play. Mm-hmm. But I think that like
the moments of humor are so important.
Yeah, I was gonna say two things.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Please.
But I would say like when I did play this game, it was with like half of my normal group, and like it was definitely a more like overall serious tone to it, and I think a lot of that comes from this. So it was like a cool change of pace for us, but we were still able to like inject a healthy amount of our normal comfortable play style.
Totally.
So it's not like you have to play a different way.
No, I want GMs and players to bring their own whatever they find fun to the game, and I think that even if you're playing a type 3 fun kind of game, like we like to play, we still have moments of levity, moments of laughing, moments of like
you have to, or the horror doesn't work.
Joy, because horror only works in contrast.
What? That's a great point.
Like
cool.
you have to have that. You have to have that contrast, and especially we see this even during during chapter 2. A lot of the humor was out of character humor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like above board humor. It's us laughing about certain things that are not, it isn't something funny that's happening in the scene, but it's some funny thing that somebody says at the table to like
you can
really
break the fourth wall and then rebuild it immediately after you've all had a
really
laugh.
good at that. So I would say, do you mind? I run a lot of the playtesting sessions for the cast before they get in with the GM and do the official season. And that is the session where everybody learns it.
Yeah.
They can mess up. There's no stakes, the cameras aren't rolling. And one thing that I always say when I'm teaching it specifically is that the humor is going to be above board and we're going to be serious in the game, which is not because everybody playing has to be serious in the game all the time, but because very often people aren't used to playing a serious, dramatic game, much less a horrific one.
Right.
And setting that bar at the top means that we kind of get somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And it is the blend of humor and a blend of horror. But I think that depending on what a GM wants, if you do want this game to be serious and your players are not used to it, it's always best to set the stakes.
Well, I think that's the perfect point, is like just setting those expectations ahead of time. So it's like, hey, we can, this is what this game is kind of built for, but there's obviously a lot of flexibility in here. What do you guys want to do with it? Just talk about it with your players beforehand.
So, yeah. So like talking about tone, I think tone is one of the most important conversations in any game that you play. But I think Candela specifically can support something like Scooby-Doo, if you want to go that route of like...
Please, someone do a Scooby-Doo Candela.
But I think that you can do that kind of thing and the game doesn't
I almost have a question related
right?
to that.
Yeah.
So two more quick ones here, because I think we're over time.
Bob will spend forever with
people are wondering, this is the first game on Illuminated Worlds. Is there ideas in the works of what's already coming next? Is it Scooby-Doo? is what I'm trying to know.
So what we can say... Actually, yep, great, good idea, thank you. Look, I think that right now we are really excited about Candela, and Illuminated Worlds was a scaffolding upon which we built it.
Yeah.
There are so many ways that we could go, right? And I think we're excited about all of those possibilities. Of course, we have ideas of what we could do next, in that using the same kind of system. But our big focus right now is Daggerheart.
Right.
Truthfully, that is what our brain space is in. So yes, and also some other
now,
I think the complete answer to that though is also that we design Daggerheart all day, and occasionally we will design games for fun in our free time.
All right.
Yeah. For no reason.
Well, perfect answer.
And I think also one of the things that I think about too is that I want to ensure that those who play Candela continue to feel supported with Candela.
Right.
And so the amount of systems that we build on the Illuminated Worlds, I don't want it to... I personally don't want it to feel as though we are just inundating an audience with 1,000 different games they could play. I want to make sure that as we move forward, we are thinking about that and also continuing to support the things that we've already built.
Yeah. So I said 2 questions, but here's 1.5, because people did ask, are there any expansions planned for Candela, character options, anything like that?
So the book just came out.
Of course. It literally just happened.
Yeah. So the book just came out.
But they're already give me another book. So
we're so excited that people want more, and there's so much more. I mean, I think that it's probably fairly obvious the ways in which you could do more books with this, adventures, monsters, all sorts of new places, all these things.
But it's Daggerheart's kind of the main focus right now, the design team.
And I think that there's all this development work to be done on the back end of what do we want to do?
Yeah.
Right? And
take more time to think about it. Yeah.
Spenser made this brilliant point the other day, actually in the office, which is that writing the book is the last fifth of game design. And the idea being that oftentimes people will think you just have to write the book. If you just write the book, you'll have a game. But you can't write the manual if you don't build the computer. And we have now Candela as a game, but to do the next book, we have to do research and we have to figure out what we want to explore. And so much of that process is actually the reading and the going to museums and the visiting different places that, again, it will very much resemble building the computer and then writing the manual.
Yeah, and listening to the people who have played it and figuring out what they want too. Because if we know that there's one thing that people are, if people are really excited about Old Fair, or if people are really excited about, the getting more in depth in the Fairlands and knowing kind of, more street by street what's there. All of those things could be exciting to us. We have to decide what we want to spend the next year of our lives doing, and also what the audience will want from the game that we're making.
And I think it plays well back into something we talked about earlier. Is with these festivals, you built these pieces that can easily be plugged in and played. And in a way, the more a thing is fleshed out, the more tight those things become. It's a little harder for a GM to move things as they please. So they're like, let there be breathing room too for the.
Totally. I think that is the process, right? It's like we give you the scaffolding, and then either we give you more scaffolding somewhere else, if that's what we find they want. But if there are lots of people who are like, no, we can take that and make it our own, but we want to know what you think about it, right?
Yeah. God bless also the person. I think they're an archaeology student, an anthropology major, who tweeted at me or you and asked what cremation would look like in the Fairlands.
Wow.
And I immediately was like, thank you so much for asking. I have an answer for you, and it is very long. So I do think also part of it is the two of us combined are sitting on some absolutely ridiculous lore.
Yeah. And like waiting a little to hear what people want to know.
Yes.
You already have a lot of ideas.
I am always so tickled when people ask us, because it, exactly as Spenser said, is a sign of what people are interested in. I hope people are interested in Old Fair for me, so that I can work on that. But
well, and one more thing just before we move on. Specifically, we never gave a map of Old Fair, and that was purposeful. Yeah, we gave a map of New Fair and of the Fairlands, but Old Fair, it's just a bunch of places, and that's specifically so that you can put them underneath the places that your players are already going, right? If we created this map and it was like, here's the above and here's the below, and we asked you to make a game out of that, then if you were like, well, I can't put the ziggurat in below Silver Slip because it's actually below the eaves or whatever. It's like, or it's actually below South Soffit, and it's like, what are we doing?
Right.
What are we doing here? Like this is a game. This is a world. This is a game that's designed to play fun stuff. Like, why are we purposefully hemming ourselves in places we don't need to?
Exactly.
And so so we made that. I think the three of us, or I think that you and me, Tracy, like looked at each other and we were like, I don't think we need to do that.
How absolutely ridiculous of us to be like, we have so many answers and we will give you none of them because we also have no answers.
The book also came out less than a month ago. Yeah, so it's fine to not.
Me? Is that true?
Yeah, it happened very fast. Yeah. So the final question, because of course people are going to ask about this, I also kind of encouraged it, was Daggerheart. Yeah. I did get to like play a little yesterday, super fun, but people want to know just about like, is there any talk about a like default setting at all for Daggerheart? General like, what is the playtest going to look like as that starts to open up?
Yeah.
So just anything you want to or can talk about with Daggerheart so far.
Really excited for Daggerheart. We all got to play together yesterday, so you
and it was fun.
So you can kind of hopefully you got a sense of the ethos of the game. Mm-hmm. But the long and the short of it is, we want to build a game that allows you to both bring your own world to life and support you if you want to play in a world that exists already. Yeah. And so there will be tools in the book, like there's the opportunity to collaboratively create the region or space that you're going to be playing in. Right. And also we will be providing places. Scaffolding.
The wider ethos of the game design as a whole.
So like we'll be providing the scaffolding for places. If you're like, hey, I just want to jump in and play a one shot, and I don't want to have to build a place, on the fly like we did in our game. Yeah. I'm just going to open up a page and I'm going to have a setting that I can use. Cool. But the ethos of the game as a whole is collaborative. Yes. So like even if you are even on those pages that are they're giving you information about a place, they're going to again they're going to do more than just be the book providing stuff to the GM. It's going to be book providing to the GM, book asking things of the GM, and the GM asking things of players. Yeah. So that we get that whole inclusivity down the line. And I think that that is the thing that people who haven't done that kind of building before in collaborative games, I think get the most afraid of, because they're like, well, I'm I'm not sure I want to like be a part of that, but we all do it anyways because we all build backstories for our characters, right? So like when we build the backstory, we are essentially pointing to a place and going, I'm from here. This is what my family was like. Like we build that scaffolding as players all the time. And it's just about the GM using the stuff that the players have built, asking questions, building on their answers. And so I think the education of that and showing people, I remember even within the company when I was like, this is kind of what I want to do. And people were, people ask questions about like, okay, well, we have Exandria, we have, like, how does all of this fit together? And there are answers to all those things that will be coming. But, like, I think that the thing to take away from it is that you can provide enough that people feel supported, but not so much that people feel limited. And the approach there to people that haven't done that before might feel scary or like it's too much burden, but when you actually get into play, it just feels like we all are invested in the thing that we're doing. So that's kind of that's
it's a streamlined process for what we already do.
It's a mechanized process for what we already do as well, which is cool.
And not to sound saccharine, but we are building games. The operative verb in game is play.
True.
And I think that it's worth remembering that games and the design of them, the books of them, are also playing with you. And so to dole them out like a set of rules that must be followed or you will be punished, rather than the reality of the situation was, it's a toy. We are making elaborate, beautiful, wonderful, engaging toys. And I think when we remember that, it makes for some of the most satisfying gameplay.
I would say I really appreciate that perspective. That's something I try to like enforce with my videos in general is like you want enough of a box so you can think outside the box, but you don't want. That's my cool quote for this.
That's
you had
so
the computer
good.
and the manual. You had the horror contrast. That one's mine. Sure.
It's so
Imagine
good.
me saying that.
I think on the playtest side too, wider playtesting is coming, and you're gonna be able to like experience what the game has to offer. You're gonna see the way in which we've approached it, and I think one of the things that I saw people get worried about when we first showed it at Gen Con, people were like, do the players have to make this stuff up? Is it like, is it enforcing? Is it like, there's no rules essentially? It's like just open narrative. You're rolling dice and it's only like the game has
structure.
A fair amount of structure and rules. And the way that the game functions, the GM can just build the world if they want. Right? I think that's the takeaway is like the GM can do as much of that as they want. The game encourages you to collaborate with your players in doing it, but it's not mechanized in a way where if you're the kind of GM who loves to just like build a full world and then release your players into it, the game totally supports that. It's just a matter of what scale are you at as a GM, and we give you tools to support you at whatever level you're at there. So I think that's kind of it. There's lots of cool stuff. I mean, you played it yesterday, so there's plenty to talk about.
Literally an entire other discussion. So I think this is a perfect place to wrap it up.
I love it.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for playing with us.
Thanks for inviting me to play. All right.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. Cut. Yeah. You can just set the mic down there.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, you guys.
Okay.